Is it on? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you. I am Nicole Connolly, and this is for my class, Modular 2, and I am appreciative of my friend and colleague, Ms. Ski, for being here with me today. Sarah, who is one of my Algebra 1 partner teachers. We collaborate together daily. So, Ms. Ski, if you could tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm Sarah Smigalski. This is my 9th year teaching and my 3rd county teaching. I taught for 2 years in King George, Virginia, and taught 4 years, all 8th grade mathematics, algebra, and geometry in Virginia also. And this is only my 2nd year in Maryland teaching Algebra 1 with Nicole and teaching Algebra 2.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Do you think there's definitely sound on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
should
good. There's no way I could have turned it off. I just
should
thought
be
about
fine.
that. Okay, all right, for us to get through the whole thing and not have sound. We hope you are hearing us. Okay, all right, so I gave the article to Sarah to read on teacher burnout or demoralization, and I actually found the topic. I had already responded in a couple of other things on Modular 2. I had never heard the term demoralization used in that way, and I found that interesting. Burnout is obviously, something that I've heard, and then how it compared and discussed how teachers leaving the profession maybe prematurely than that 30-year retirement mark, and what some of whatever was contributing to that. So I asked Sarah just to go ahead and read the article and what things kind of stood out to her, and if we could kind of have some dialogue about that.
I thought it was very interesting the way that they defined burnout as being something, us being tired, us being just kind of not necessarily overwhelmed, but it just being a lot for a day-to-day task, which it is. We're here long hours, we're here in the mornings, in the afternoons, when am I going to get this grading done? And kind of that being our, I'm done, I don't want to put this much effort in anymore, kind of as the burnout. And they really talked about how that's seen as kind of a bad thing for teachers, that, well, you can't cut it, you can't handle it anymore. And the idea of demoralization is people more being kind of just defeated. And I feel that sometimes with what's going on with the standardized testing and with all the requirements that we have. And now, now we have these new lesson plans that we have to do. And now we have all this extra stuff and the data, and how we just feel like we can't teach what we want to teach, and how we feel like our students need to be taught. And people kind of losing the faith in the system as more of the demoralization. And the article really talked about, identifying the two different things, and are you burnout, or are you kind of losing, kind of your kind of faith in the system, and what can we do to rejuvenize you, and kind of how can we bring teachers back into the teaching force and keep them here.
I thought with the burnout, because I think there's an element of burnout that happens at the end of your 30 years or whenever it is that you're retiring. I'm not sure if I'd even call that burnout. I think at some point you're just tired and you're done. And that's okay when that happens. I think the big thing that the difference maker for me was that the burnout, it can, when you look at the demoralization, it becomes more of that one person. And that one person becomes so introspective in what they can't do that they're demoralized and thinking that they can't do that job anymore, and hence having to leave the profession. You were familiar with the term prior. So, seeing those differences between the two terms, teachers do burn out, and that's actually, I haven't told you everything like that I'm doing in this class, but it's really about the wellness of a teacher and how being a teacher is not the easy gig that, a lot of people, our school system isn't having, where we are in Maryland, our school system isn't struggling to keep, to get qualified teachers, but we have neighboring counties that have so many non-qualified teachers that are, what do you call that when you're on a,
like probationary?
Yeah, provisional teachers, that they are giving, 2-year or 3-year cycles to be able to get in to be teachers. We don't have that, but I think that speaks to, we don't have the number of students going into college to become teachers, and I think pay is one of the things that plays into that, and then some of the requirements that you kind of touched upon that lead to that burnout. And I think if you can't hang, like if you can't cut the mustard, then it's like you're demoralized and thinking that it's you. And what this class is, it's like, how do you maintain that balance? How do you maintain your own personal health, emotional, physical, spiritual, all those things, your well-being, when the demands are quite strenuous in this job. So
well, and that was one of those like one of the sentences that I highlighted in the article is it talked about self-care, but it talked about self-care as not the total answer to being rejuvenized in the field. Like that's only part of it. Like you were saying, like there's other things that need to happen, and admin needs to be on board, and your community of teachers. And we've been very fortunate this year that we have planning together, and we can plan and talk every day and work through those things, where I've worked in counties where I was the only person teaching that subject, and I felt so alone and so kind of like, am I doing this right? Where are my resources? What we're fortunate here where we have the resources, and we have like content specialists that come and see us and check in on us, and not every county has that, and that can be very kind of.
So you've experienced some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first year teaching, we didn't have content specialists. I was brand new. I was teaching content that I, wasn't super familiar with because
first
it's your first year. And I was handed the pacing guide, and I was handed a textbook and said, here you go, like figure it out. And it was, oh, you have the freedom to make your own tests, and you have the freedom to make your own worksheets, and they tried to sell it or kind of spin it as freedom, which now I appreciate as a senior teacher having taught. But at the same time, like I needed more support starting out, and not having common planning with anybody else that was teaching this subject, and not having access to like the special ed teachers when I had those students in my class. And really, I think some of this comes down to like supporting those first year teachers and carrying them on. And a lot of times, like when I was new to the county last year, I almost felt like, oh, well, you've taught before, so
you should have it.
You're good. And it's not necessarily that way.
It's not the same everywhere.
And kind of knowing where your resources are and who to reach out to. This year being the first year teaching in Maryland and having the union. Like I know we have some awesome union reps in our school that really fight for us and fight for, not just pay, but like our time to be our time, and keeping our planning periods and keeping those collaborative plannings. Like I feel very grateful and supported for that. Where in Virginia we didn't have a union, so we didn't have things that
You didn't have a union?
It's not a union state. So we had like our NEA kind of that you could pay dues to, but it was not a union.
Fighting on behalf of you
right.
guys.
So it was very different. But I think too that it's just different counties require different things. They talked about kind of all the different things compiled. It's not one new thing. Like we have learning focus this year, which I know we're comfortable with because it's something we already do, like learning expectations. Now we form it as a question instead of a learning goal. We're already doing that. And it's good to kind of look back and be reminded, hey, you need to be using graphic organizers. You need to be doing this. But I feel like a lot of people in our building are thinking about it as that's one more thing I have to do, and now you're putting one more thing on me.
Right.
And that's compiling to now I have to do this paperwork, and now I have to do this type of lesson. But my first county I taught in, we had to submit daily lesson plans, had to be submitted to admin. And like we've never had to do that here. Like I couldn't imagine having to do that. I mean, we keep our own lesson plans, and we do a lot more than most teachers do. But
well, and I think that speaks to a couple of different things. Number one, the whole lesson plan thing. I know there's been administrators, and there are some in this county, that if they come into your room, they expect to see your plan book, whatever your plans are for that day. Doesn't have to be like a scripted whatever, like it was a formal observation. We work with an administrator who's at least, let's just say this, if you're doing what you should be doing, that's not a requirement. I'm sure there might be some people in here who might be needing to do more. So, I think you kind of touched on that, Sarah, where there are differences in what's coming from the administration, what's different in the culture. I think another thing too that you said when you talked about like the learning goals now being changed into like the essential questions, because we're doing a learning focus model here in the county that we're in now. And it's really nothing different than anything that we've been doing. I mean, you've been teaching 13, 14 years?
9.
Oh, 9. Oh my gosh, I'm adding years. Sorry.
Get me closer to retirement.
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to add the 2 because like the 13 and the 9. So I've been in 22 years, but it all comes back. They used to say like a 10-year cycle. It almost seems like the cycles are tightening up some now.
Mm-hmm.
They're more like a 7, 8. I bet you're starting to see some things come back around again
absolutely.
already.
Absolutely.
So I think some of that is perspective. So it's interesting in a high school where we've got, 100 plus personnel within a building and something gets, spoken out to or about or introduced and people are, arms are up and I can't believe and this kind of thing. And it's a perspective from a teacher.
Right.
Just some of it you don't need to stress about it. Like keep it in perspective.
Yeah, and people, especially this year when the learning focus got rolled out, was, well, how am I going to be evaluated on this? And how is it going to affect my evaluation? And how this, and I never, like, those questions didn't really cross my mind. I'm like, okay, like, yes, that's a great thing to have. And we already do that. So now we'll state them as questions. And it's good because it keeps the kids coming back and we can use it as a closing activity. Kind of, can we answer this daily question now? But I think that all goes to this demoralization. Like if teachers feel overwhelmed and they feel like they're losing autonomy of their classrooms, and then we add one little more thing to it and that kind of scale just starts to tip, and then we add another little thing to it, and that's where they just kind of get beaten down. And I think that happens in a lot of places. And I know teachers personally. Like I have a girlfriend right now, she taught for 10 years. She stayed home with her kids, so she stayed home for 10 or 12 years until her kids were middle school age. And she went back to teaching. She actually came back the year before me, so she's been teaching for 10 years. And she's at the point now where she's like, she doesn't have to work. So financially she's stable, which I'm not in that position. But she's that can change her perspective too. Yes. She, we were just having a conversation this morning. She's like, I don't know if I'm going to sign my letter of intent. She said, I'm tired of working for admin that don't support me. I'm tired of not having the resources. I mean, they're unfortunately in a place where they're buying their own copy paper. I mean, that's kind of how bad it is right now. But the student, and she doesn't feel respected. The students know that she doesn't feel respected, and a lot of the staff, so then she feels like the kids don't respect her, and it's just kind of snowballed downhill, and she's kind of done. And so she's like, I don't know if I want to stick it out for one more year for the kids, or if it's better for the kids for next year, that I go ahead and retire or quit. I didn't say quit, but she's at that point where, and she's trying to decide, do I become a specialist? Do I, what can get me out of the classroom? And we see that so much now. And she's actually thinking about going into like teacher training. So going back in and kind of helping train teachers and kind of helping to fix these problems or work with them to try to fix some of these problems that we all face. And try to give them that support.
Well, I think, so I'm watching the time there where we're at. What are some of the things that we need to do to prevent some of this burnout and the demoralization? We talked a little bit about the training up front, having more supports in for new teachers. Sarah, you touched upon that. Now, had you only taught at the school in Virginia?
I taught at 2 different Virginia schools.
2 different, basically the same content?
Yes, I taught 8th grade, Algebra 1 and Geometry, all to 8th graders for 2 years in King George County, and then I taught the same 3 contents for 4 years in Falls Church City.
And if I remember just from prior conversations, it was the same administrator?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I
you didn't
really,
you haven't had an administration change within a particular building that you were in?
I have, because the first year that I went to Falls Church to follow that administrator, she became ill and resigned at the end of the year. So then I went through 2 new administrators over the next 3 years in that building that were completely different personalities and
which changes
fully flip-flopped kind of what was required and kind of what things were. And I think that's something we've been lucky here is, at least in the high school we're at now, like I feel so supported by our admin and feel like they know what's going on in the building, and they're not micromanaging by any means, but they're aware of what goes on, and they're open, their door's always open. And I think that's a big part of this is some people feel shut off from their admin and they can't go to them with problems.
Not able to approach and that kind of thing. Well, and I remember being in school, and one of the first things that they taught us in my undergrad was you cannot teach if you cannot manage. So meaning you need to be able to control the kids.
Absolutely.
And whose job is that to help those new teachers coming in? So I definitely think that the teacher training, from the beginning.
And if we can give new teachers the support they need. You know, we talk about burnout being closer to the end, you know, after 9 years, 10 years. If, like, I feel like having good classroom management in my first couple years will keep me from burning out as soon.
Absolutely, yeah.
But the demoralization really needs to be a whole community-wide. Like, you need to have those common plannings. You need to have a union that voices for you and speaks up. You need to have an open dialogue with your admin. One of the things that they brought up in this article was about staff surveys, and I know we take different ones every year.
Multiple.
Yeah, and I feel like, and they really pointed out, like, these staff surveys are very narrowing, and the questions that they ask don't always address the issues that are going on.
Right.
And a lot of times, like they stated here, it said, like, staff surveys ask you things like, are you not doing this because it interferes with your family life, or you don't like your school leadership? Well, that may be an issue for some people, but a lot of it is more, you know, they need to be asking the right questions, and they need to be asking, like, what else can we do to support you? How else can we help, you know? And having not just the surveys, but having teams that kind of get together, and how can we support our teachers? What do you need?
And brainstorm and bring that back together. The same things we do in a classroom.
Yes, and I think a lot of times, I mean, I think our school does a very good job of that we have teams that are saying, okay, let's try to make sure we have common planning for our teachers. Let's do the, like they're doing the vertical articulation. We're getting subs for some of our teachers, so we can go and meet with the 8th grade teachers, and we can meet with the teachers above us and say, okay, what do we need them to know? Like that activity we did at lunch.
Within our department.
Within our department that says, what can we do to help your kids be more successful next year? And what can you do to help those kids be more successful for us? And that kind of just makes us feel valued.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the demoralization is teachers not feeling valued or having control over their classroom anymore.
Well, I think as we look to kind of tie up, we're about to the end here. One of the things, and I don't know if it really went into it in this article, it's been part of this modular, but is self-efficacy. I don't know if I've mentioned that to you. But self-efficacy is something that I've done a lot of reflection on with regard to my students and them having that belief in themselves and being able to perform. What I never did was to think about myself in terms of self-efficacy, and this modular took us there. And when I read it, I went, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. And how does my belief in what I am being asked to do, my own personal self-efficacy, transfer to the 100 students that I teach and interact with every day?
Right.
And I think maybe we can kind of close up there, because I think that's kind of part, I mean, we can say administration, we can say the teacher training and all that, but at some point, a teacher needs to be able to believe in themselves and be able to perform to the best that they think. Now, it might not be what somebody else thinks they should be doing, but to have that belief in oneself is what's going to be enough to keep you going. So
absolutely. And the kids can gauge that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they absolutely can. And there's days where we come in and we're
some
like,
of them, like vultures, can gauge that. Yeah.
And especially in the high school setting, like if you don't know your content or you're not on your A game that day, you have to fake it till you make it kind of thing. Yeah. Or they're gonna pick up on that. Yeah. And I mean, for example, we had a substitute last year, a long-term sub. I mean, and she really struggled. She didn't know the content, and she wasn't self-confident in herself, and the kids picked up on it quickly, and they ate her alive. They didn't respect her because they're like, you don't know this, we're not going to listen to you. And it was so hard to try to build her back up and try to get her to where she felt confident teaching. And I think that's something that we kind of check and double check ourselves to make sure, and really, I mean, that comes back to planning and just what are the questions the kids are going to ask? How is this going to be portrayed? And there's days we're tired and but we have to be positive, and we have to, because that translates to our kids.
It does.
And really encouraging them, especially in the math classroom, keeping them, okay, keep going, you're on the right track.
Because I always say no one comes into high school math class clicking their heels, okay? Most of them don't do that. So I already feel like as teachers, you know, that's one thing. So it's just winning them over, that relationship piece, which is one that we talk about, you know, a lot as well. So I don't know, anything to close with?
I think just having a good support system. I think trying to find friends that, you know, teacher friends, colleagues, and people that are going to support you and that you can talk about these things with. And, you know, it's okay to go to a neighbor and be like, I'm I need
Mhm.
some time, or I need,
Yeah.
pick me back up, put me
Time
back
out.
together, you know?
Yeah.
And to talk about the issues that we're upset about. You know, I know we're pacing sometimes is really, like, there's so much to cover, and we just want to slow down and make sure they're really getting it. And we have this pressure to, no, you have to keep
Right.
moving forward. And is that best for the kids and not? And just having that fluid dialogue
Yeah.
is really, I think, the only way that we're going to get to that point.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity, Sarah. I owe you. So thank you very much, and I hope I can successfully upload.